I want to welcome everybody, and I am Rabbi Devorah Lynn, and I'm the co-chair of Jewish Earth Alliance with Mirala Goldsmith. And I want to welcome everybody who's here. And if you would like, put your name and where you're from in the chat. And if you're connected to an institution or a synagogue, if you could put that down, people find each other regionally sometimes on this chat. And is anyone who's on so far a first timer to the to our meeting here? If you can raise your hand. I know my speakers are. So welcome, Heidi. Where are you from?
Berkeley, California.
Oh, Berkeley, great. I was just there for 5 months.
Oh, well, I mean, I got this and it was intriguing to me, so I thought I'd check it out.
Great, great. Anybody else? George, did you say you're, yeah. And where are you from, George?
No, can't hear me. Hold on.
Chat.
Okay, I'm from.
Oh, you're muted.
Muted. Okay, yes, I'm from Connecticut.
Great.
The Congregation for Humanistic Judaism of Fairfield County.
Oh, terrific.
And we've done some social action things locally, and I just want to see what you folks are doing, and so I'm here. Basically,
Great.
it.
Great. So we're coast to coast here, and I'm in Washington, D.C. now. So I want to say a hearty hello also to our regulars, of course. So let's dig right in. Our agenda tonight is we will start with a guest to inspire the meeting, followed by a report on our upcoming summer actions, and then our guest speaker on the Farm Bill. And to end, we will contact our members of Congress in an action about our action alert. So, okay, so let's start. Our guest clergy tonight is Rebecca Joy Fletcher. She is the director of Jewish life at Coastal Roots Farm in Encinitias, California. Rebecca is an ordained synagogue cantor, a professional actor and playwright, and a climate activist. She founded the Fletcher Studio to coach and train individuals as well as organizations in embodied leadership and climate communication. Her passion for Judaism, climate, and food justice and embodied learning are at the root of every challenge she takes on. And so now at Coastal Roots Farm, she's responsible for deepening and multiplying the farm's earth-based Judaism programs, teachings, and rituals in an open-hearted, inquisitive, and inclusive way. We welcome you, Rebecca, to
Devorah, you're muted somehow.
Yeah, was I muted when I was introducing her?
No, only for the last line.
Okay, I said we welcome you, Rebecca, to inspire us with your passion.
Thank you. I was going to joke and say, you know, within an open-hearted, like, I hope, you know, you never know. Maybe today I won't be, but I hope. Thank you. I feel honored to be here. And it's always kind of a funny thing to listen to one's own bio and think, you know, I don't know if all that's true. So who knows if it's all true, but I'm glad to be with you anyways. Thank you. So I wanted to, we have about 10 minutes together, or I have about 10 minutes with you. And I wanted to offer a little bit of teaching and then a small piece that's experiential. That's my plan for us. And I wanted to begin, really what I wanted to look at with you today is, I'm assuming you're all here, not only for yourselves, but also as members of communities, as inspirers of communities, as people who are going to go back out of this call and rally your troops or join other rallying troops. I'm assuming that. And I want to acknowledge that sometimes as a rallier of troops, as someone as anyone who's you know, fighting for our earth, there are moments of great hope and inspiration, and then there are moments, I would imagine you've all had them, I certainly have, where I don't feel so hopeful. And so I wanted to address that. And I want to start by talking a little bit about hope, really. So within Jewish tradition, there are various words that could approximate the word hope, but the best word, tikva, is a word that appears much in modern Hebrew. For example, Hatikva, the national anthem of Israel, from the word tikva, the hope. But the word tikva is not a word, that is not a concept that floats around the Torah. It's not a thing. When Abraham's out talking to God in the desert, the word hope, tikva, does not come up. When the children of Israel are on the edge of the sea, the word tikva, do we feel hopeful? Are we going to cross? Is it going to land on us? The Egyptians are coming. It's not a thing that's talked about. So what is? What is talked about, what is a value, a concept, a source of nourishment, is the idea of emunah, which can be some people translate it as faith. For our conversation, I'm going to translate it as faithful action, like staying the course. So I'm going to direct you in that regard to another, we skip ahead from the Torah many years from the Jewish Bible, and we get to Rambam, Maimonides, great Jewish scholar and thinker and rabbi authority in Muslim Spain. He creates these principles of faith. And the 12th one goes like this. Ani ma'amin beviat hamashiach. I believe, this is one of the principles. I believe in the coming of the Messiah. Aha, but it wouldn't be Jewish if there weren't a little more to that, right? Ve'af al pi sheyitmameh. And even though, incidentally, the Messiah happens to be very late, right? Even though I baked my cookies and I got on my nice dress and I wrote a sign, hello, Messiah, the Messiah is very late, even though, af al pi chen, echakel lo b'kol yom she'yavo. Even so, I have decided of my own volition that every day, I'm going to go out there to my front yard and I'm going to actively wait for the Messiah. So, why do I say this? Because that position, to acknowledge that the Messiah, however you could define the Messiah, doesn't matter. The great hope, great possibility, a healed world, even though we all acknowledge that that's very late. And you know what? When someone's very late and you're waiting on a first date for a date that's like 45 minutes late, you know what you do? You leave, right? So the point is, like, if they're very late, it would be easy to say, and you know what? I think I'm not going to say this principle of faith today, actually, because like very late is like no show. But instead, I am going to choose of my own power to go stand in that front yard with a big Hello Messiah sign and my pretty dress on, and I'm going to get all ready and have balloons, and I'm going to be standing there even if the Messiah is crazy late. And so what that means, that's in effect emunah. It's the same word that Rambam uses, ani ma'amin, I believe in. I have faithful action in. So I want to offer that to you as a thought for the moments that perhaps you leave this call and you're all inspired and you go back to your people and they're not so inspired. Or tomorrow you read something in the news that makes you think, what am I ever going to be able to do? I can't do anything. For those moments, know that in Jewish tradition, feeling hopeful, not so important actually. Staying the course of action by choice, by choosing to, even when it seems completely irrational because the Messiah is very, very late and your cake is already gone flat, right? Even so, that is a Jewish act to say, gosh darn it, I'm going to wait for the Messiah anyways, even if it's completely irrational. And so I offer that to you for the moments that you or the people that you seek to rally with you may say, I don't feel so hopeful about this. Because you know what? It's fine. They don't have to feel hopeful to act with faithfulness. So that's the first piece of our learning. And the second piece of our learning together is another way around it. And this is going to involve you. So I want to posit to you that when we act in community, when we're not advocates alone, right? As you are all right now on this call, and then you're going back to places where you're going to be advocates in community, we are always either uplifting each other or receiving strength. Depends on the moment, right? I might feel super fired up and the person next to me is like, what is this all about? And then tomorrow it'll be vice versa. We're always giving and receiving, whether we're aware of it or not. So I just would like us to give and receive a little to each other right now, before you head into the real doing, which is learning about and advocating around the Farm Bill. So here's what I'm going to invite you to do. It's going to be a little strange, but don't worry. If you don't like it, it'll be over in 3 minutes, so you'll be fine. Okay? So I'm going to invite you, and you know what? No, forget I just said that. Okay, here's what I'm going to invite you to do. You don't have to look at me. Just listen to my voice. I'm going to invite you to take your hands and first look at your hands. And I want you to start, this is imagination work. So imagination work always helps if you just do it really light touch and you don't worry if you're doing it right or not, because there is no right. I'm going to ask you, that's a great idea. Let's just start by waking up our hands a bit. Like, hello, I do have hands. I've neglected them all day, but here they are. Okay. And now I'm going to ask you in your imagination work to start imagining some kind of a delicious, yummy, beautiful ball in your hands. It's a ball of inspiration. I'm going to encourage you to choose something simple to imagine. Maybe it's the face of your grandchild, like all over that ball. Maybe it's a tree. Maybe it's the color orange, which always gives you a sense of hope. Something simple. And again, you don't need to look at me, but just imagine that you are imbuing this space between your hands with a ball of uplifting, joyfulness. And again, just a simple thing. Maybe it's a flower you saw. Maybe it's the face of a friend. Maybe it's just the feeling of your hands moving, you know? And in a moment, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. So listen to the instructions first. Don't take your eyes off your ball. In a moment, I'm going to ask all of you, whether you're seated or standing, it doesn't matter. We are all going to start sending it out. Now, here's what I mean. Just keep listening to me. You don't have to look at me. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to take that ball with one arm, bring it back behind you. Don't do it yet. And then with an underhanded pass, you're going to throw it out in your imagination to someone else on the screen, to another person. You're sending out this ball. And here's how we're going to do it. Just keep listening. We're going to do it for about 30 seconds. I'm going to stop talking and basically just send them out when you want to and stand back and receive when you want to. Send them out and receive. You don't even know who's sending you one, so just play along. Pretend everyone's sending you one. So let's just start. But when you send it to someone specific in your mind and send it with love. Why are you sending it? To give them koyach, to give them strength. So I'm going to stop talking and just send. And when you receive, just let yourself receive as if someone was giving you a beautiful gift. And here we go. And don't forget to receive. Sometimes it's easier just to give. And if you always receive, don't forget to give. And if you lose touch with what your ball is, come back. Like, oh yeah, that tree. Okay, I'm going to send it out. And we're going to do one more thing right now. Come back to your ball And now everyone, send it to everyone. And here we go together. And now you can begin your work. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Amen. Amen to that. Hope. Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was beautiful.
Thank you, everybody. You are all welcome anytime at Coastal Roots Farm. So please come and visit, or if you have any questions about this work or anything that we do, please feel free to ask. I put my email in the chat, and I'd love to hear from you.
Maybe put it in again for the people
I
who
will.
came a little bit
I
later.
will.
Thank you. I wanted to do that. Yeah.
And may you be
Coastal Roots
strong
Farm.
and
Pardon, go
strong and
ahead.
of good cheer in your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us tonight. Coastal Roots Farm is a nonprofit Jewish community farm and education center near in Encinitias, California. So if you're on your way to Legoland
Yes.
or San
Come
Diego,
to us instead. We're better.
yes, I was going to say it's better than Legoland. It's great for the kids too. It's terrific. A beautiful, beautiful place to visit. All right. Thank you so much. I hope you all got inspired by tossing that ball of imagination. So I now want to have one of our steering committee members, Rabbi Melanie Aaron from Los Gatos, California, but now with us in Washington, D.C., is going to speak to us about our actions this summer. And it's her birthday, so let's all wish her a happy birthday. I know you didn't want me to tell you, right? Happy birthday to you. May you have many more in good health and good action.
Well, thank you. And thank everyone for their good wishes. Thank Rebecca for introducing tikva, hope, and confidence, and emunah, the confidence that the choices we make are significant. I am fired up. I am excited to announce that we are going to have a summer lobby day. We were very pleased with our Tu B'Shvat lobby day. I see many of those who participated with us on the screen, and I want to thank you for participating. We are fortunate enough to have lined up another intern to work with us this summer to help smooth all the details. So please mark your calendars for our virtual lobby days on Tuesday and Wednesday, July 25th and 26th. There will be a link in the chat for people who want to sign up. We chose those days for two reasons. First of all, they're right before the summer recess for Congress. And we understand that that's a time when a lot of things happen. They stall and they stall and they stall and they stall, but right before recess, they need to get some things done. It is also right before Tisha B'Av, which commemorates the destruction of the first and second temples. And it's a time to consider the warnings that we received from the prophets. Think of the words of Jeremiah. Reflect on how we ignored those warnings, and that led to disaster. And we have the option not to ignore the warnings that we are receiving, but to act. So our lobby day will convey that important message that we need to act, and act now to heed the warnings that we are receiving. Again, please sign up. There's a link in the chat. Fill out some information and we will get back to you with more details. There will be an informational webinar in June talking about the issues that we'll be lobbying on, and we'll follow that up in July with a webinar which will talk more about the nuts and bolts of lobbying. So thank you all very much. Please pass the word, and we hope you'll join us to lobby for Tisha B'Av. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Melanie, for setting that up. And I'm so excited because I want to report that at our next meeting on June 20th, our guest speaker will be the Emmy Award winning and tireless climate advocate, Ed Begley Jr. from California. He bought his first EV, an electric bike, in 1970. And he has accepted my invitation for him to speak on that date. So I want you all to bring 2 or 3 of your friends along, so we have a really great turnout. And if you've been trying to convince somebody to sign up for Lobby Day, this is a great way to introduce them to Jewish Earth Alliance and the lobby activity that we're going to be doing near Tisha B'Av. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker tonight. Geoff Horsfield worked in government affairs as a consultant, as well as at the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. He also served in AmeriCorps in Durham, North Carolina. He holds a bachelor's degree from Gettysburg College and a master's degree in public policy from the College of William and Mary. And Geoff now works on policies to make food more sustainable and healthier, including the Farm Bill and climate change and healthier, including the Farm Bill and climate change. He does this for the Environmental Working Group. At EWG, they are immersed in the most pressing challenges of our time: the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, and the products we put on our skin. Their mission is to empower us with breakthrough research to make informed choices and live a healthy life and have a healthy environment. I'm sure we've all seen in the headline news reports on food, water, and sunscreen researched and reported by the Environmental Working Group. I've been using their Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 guide to fruits and vegetables and their guide to healthy seafood for years. And I never really made the connection. I have invited Geoff Horsfield here tonight to bring some clarity to the huge upcoming Farm Bill so we can better advocate for essential climate proposals within it. So welcome, Geoff. I look forward to hearing a simplification, maybe now, an outline of the this very complicated Farm Bill and the position of climate in it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll make sure you all have my contact information as well. And to be honest, I'm thankful I precede Ed Begley Jr. rather than try to follow that act. So you all are lucky. And I'll put in a plug as somebody who works in government affairs in DC for the Lobby Day. You know, folks in Congress can hear from folks like me all the time, but you know, what really gets a meeting, what they look for as a former congressional staffer, you know, what you need to have is constituent support, right? Offices ask me, or do we have constituent support for this? Or we need to hear from people in the district. So your contacts, your advocacy is really what ends up mattering much more than anything that I can say or do from here. So I encourage you all to sign up for your Lobby Day in July. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So hopefully this works out. Can I get a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Excellent. Great. Well, like the introduction said, my name is Geoff Horsfield. I work here in government affairs for Environmental Working Group. People often connect us here with our work on the Farm Bill because we have a lot of information on climate, on conservation, on subsidy programs, and we publish a number of news pieces highlighting reforms that we need to really help prioritize climate change and feeding more people within the Farm Bill. And I'll make sure I drop some of those links in at the end as well, so that you all have that information. So first question, what is the Farm Bill? The Farm Bill has 12 titles. The ones that you should really concern yourself with are 1, 2, 4, and 11. So these are the titles that deal with the subsidy programs, like the commodity programs. They also deal with crop insurance. They also deal with the conservation title, which I'm going to talk about and mostly focus on. And they also deals with the nutrition title. And these are the important titles because honestly, that's where the money is. That's where the funding is typically provided. What is unique about the Farm Bill in terms of federal policy is that it includes a mixture of mandatory spending. So this means that Congress has to spend, the agencies have to spend this money, that this funding is guaranteed. So a lot of times what you'll hear about is something like the annual appropriations process, or if we're going to have a government shutdown. And that's because those programs are authorized but not appropriated, which means Congress every year has to allocate money to them. But in the Farm Bill, because these programs are so critical, they are mandatory spending. So Congress only has to give them money every 5 years rather than every year, which is great, if you work in federal affairs, because you want to get mandatory funding, because that means your program is going to get that much money every year. The Farm Bill has to pass every 5 years. A version of the Farm Bill has existed every year since the 1930s or so. This is primarily how we support farmers, and starting in the 1970s, how we also started supporting feeding more people. It's also unique because the Farm Bill really has a lot of regional bases as well as ideological ones. So you'll hear a lot about the fight over SNAP and the nutrition title and funding for that. You'll also hear a lot about really regional issues too, where Democrats and Republicans come together to protect, say, specialty crops or crops important to their districts. It's, again, really unique, I think, in that space. I'll mostly be focusing on the conservation title because that's really what matters when it comes to climate change. So one thing to know about the Farm Bill as well is that more than 80% of the spending goes to anti-hunger assistance programs, typically known as SNAP or TANF. Less than 20% of the Farm Bill goes to farmers. The blue and the orange parts here go to farmers in the form of subsidies, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. And then a smaller portion goes in the form of conservation payments, or payments to help farmers improve the environment. So this is things that you'll hear about from like the Inflation Reduction Act, like EQIP or the Environmental Qualities Incentives Program, or other conservation programs at USDA. A quick word on the subsidy programs, and really why I wanted to highlight this is the primary concern for environmental organizations like EWG is that even though Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act last Congress, and it included $19.5 billion to help USDA pay farmers to fight climate change, what we're concerned about is that Republicans and others are going to try to call back that money and instead direct it to other priorities like the subsidy programs, or even programs like SNAP and the nutrition title. So what we're really asking advocates to do is help Democrats and help Congress hold the line and protect this investment in climate smart agriculture and defend the $19.5 billion in climate smart agriculture. Again, a lot of folks are going to come out with deals where they might try to move this money out of the conservation programs or out of climate smart into some of these other programs. But you can see that while it's a big difference in the world in fighting climate change, in the grand scheme of the Farm Bill, it's really peanuts. So making sure that this $19.5 billion is protected is so important. And I'll touch on the subsidy programs here in a minute. So these subsidy programs, which are typically commodity or crop insurance subsidies, they're really tied to revenue and production. So the largest producers collect the lion's share of the payments. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds here because honestly, it's really easy to do that. So I encourage you, I'll send some links in the chat if you want to read more. But for things like commodity subsidies, the largest 10% of recipients collected 56% of payments. So you hear a lot about consolidation, that there are fewer and fewer farms and fewer farmers, but revenue is up for farmers across the board because there's much more consolidation in farmland. So for commodity subsidies, the largest 10% of recipients get most of the payments. For crop insurance subsidies, the largest 10% of farms receive about 66% of all crop insurance subsidies. The largest 5% of farms get about 36% of crop insurance subsidies. To kind of give you an idea of this scale, the top 1% of farmers get about $41 from the federal government, while the bottom 50% of farmers receive about $22 per acre. And most of this money is tied, again, to some of the crops that I'll touch on in a minute, but it mostly goes to corn, soybean, and wheat, as well as cotton and rice production. Only 7% of farm subsidies go to things that USDA is telling you to eat, like fruits and vegetables. So there's really this mismatch in terms of our subsidy programs and crop insurance programs and what we're actually telling people to eat. So really the largest, most successful corn and soybean farmers, primarily located in these dark green counties, they collect the most payments from the federal government. You can also guess that there are equity issues associated with this, where if you have historical inaccuracies or the richest farmers are overwhelmingly white because of historical and institutional discrimination from USDA, where USDA didn't provide support to Black farmers who then got out of farming in the 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s, or that had their land bought by white landowners or white farmers. You can see how these programs overwhelmingly favor white farmers as well. Now, all of this is important because, again, some members of Congress or farm groups are going to argue that we have to move conservation dollars and our climate smart funding that we fought so hard to get into these subsidy programs. So what they'll say is that these farmers in those dark green counties were feeding the world, right? You hear this all the time. We're feeding the world. American farmers are feeding the world. But the truth is we don't. We don't even feed the world's hungry. The vast majority of our food and farm exports go to wealthy countries. It mostly goes to Europe, it goes to Japan, it goes to Australia, some of it goes to South America, and most of what we export is animal feed and animal products. So it's typically soy and soybean feed, as well as corn and corn feed. So 35% of our exports are animal feed. So when you put all of this together, the picture becomes clear that most of our food flows to wealthy countries, not poor countries, and we're mostly growing corn and soy at record profits right now. So to touch a little bit on kind of this agriculture and climate now connection, agriculture right now, this red part here is about 11% of US emissions. It's most likely higher if you include things like fertilizer, and if you count methane a little bit better. It's most likely higher, around 15 to 17%. But right now, according to EPA, it's 11% of US emissions. These emissions are mostly powerful short-term pollutants like nitrous oxide. This comes from fertilizing corn for animal feed. It comes from nitrogen or synthetic-based fertilizers. It also comes from methane, which comes from animals and their waste, mostly cows. Now, reducing these powerful short-term gases can help stem more immediate climate impacts and make a big difference because they're so powerful but so short-term. If we want to see the most immediate reductions in greenhouse gases and try to bend this curve, reducing nitrous oxide and methane emissions are really key. US agriculture right now is the largest source of methane emissions in the United States. So whether it's from rice production, whether it's from animals combined, agriculture is the biggest source of methane here in the United States and the biggest source of nitrous oxide. Now, over the last 20 years, because of advocates like yourselves, because of the degree of emissions from transportation and the power sector, the oil and gas industry, we've made tremendous strides. It's certainly not enough, but we've made tremendous strides in lowering emissions from transportation and from the power sector. But you can see that agriculture, out of all these leading economic sectors, has primarily stayed flat or increased over the last 20 years, despite promises from various industries to lower their agriculture-based emissions. So agriculture's emissions right now are staying flat or increasing slightly while we're lowering emissions from every other sector. And this is bad news for the future. So this graph is from an analysis that was done by the Boston Consulting Group and other groups like Rhodium, people much smarter than myself, that crunch the numbers and look at what the picture is in 2050. What do US emissions look like in 2050? And they found that because we're lowering emissions from transportation, from the power sector, from industry, we have these hard targets of 100% net carbon neutral by 2035 for the power sector, for example, or buying more EVs in California or in Europe or in Michigan and producing more EVs. We're lowering these emissions from other sectors, but ag emissions, even if they stay flat, that percentage is going to go up from 11% to over 32%, making agriculture the leading source of emissions in the United States by 2050 with a business as usual approach. So farmers, ranchers are going to become the #1 source of US emissions. I hopefully don't have to get too far into why being #1 here is bad, right? We can ask the oil and gas industry, ask Chevron or BP how it feels to be #1 in emissions. That's bad politically for farmers. It's bad for the climate. It's bad for the food that we eat. And this is the future, though, unless we start making a difference. And that's really why this farm bill is so critical, from lowering these emissions from about 32% to as low as 21%. So this is what US emissions could look like if we make on-farm production emissions lower. So we can help farmers not be #1 and help them cut emissions through their food production by using the Farm Bill and the conservation programs more effectively. So for example, we can help farmers use less synthetic fertilizer or changing when they apply fertilizer. We can help plant and protect native grasslands and trees. We can add buffer areas or really help implement some of these other conservation programs so that by 2050, agriculture emissions can be much lower, even though we're trying to feed a growing population. So how are we trading those, handling those trade-offs? This slide is from the Boston Consulting Group. Like I mentioned, you can see ag emissions right there. This business as usual is that top line. You can see that dietary shifts, so eating local or incorporating more plant-based foods into your diet, that's that first line where it lowers emissions about 10%. The next one is if we only did on-farm production emissions reductions. And the last one is if we combine all these practices where we can really help cut those emissions. I'll say, because people often bring it up, eating local does help lowers emissions typically, but most emissions from agriculture are from on-farm production. It's how we raise animals, it's what we feed animals, it's both the cow and the how. So it's both what we eat and how it's produced really matters when it comes to emissions from food. So now all of this is to say that the Farm Bill is critical to helping farmers get there, to get to this 21% rather than this 32%. So the Farm Bill can use these conservation programs and help cover the costs of these practices, many of which have public benefits even beyond climate change. So they're good for air quality, they're good for water quality. So there are few opportunities in the conservation title to make adjustments to programs that farmers already know and use. EQIP, or the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, is a great example of this. It's one of the most popular conservation programs that are out there. Typically, it's so popular, only about 33% of all EQIP contract applications get funded. So the vast majority of EQIP contracts, the vast majority of farmers and ranchers that want to improve their environmental outcomes are turned away because of not enough money. And that's before the Inflation Reduction Act. So the Inflation Reduction Act is going to help deal with that backlog a little bit, but it isn't going to help clear it. So that's, again, another reason why protecting this money is so important. Now, one of the tools that EWG has is our conservation database. It's conservation.ewg.org. I'll drop a link in the chat in a minute. But what we do is we gather USDA information on where they're spending these conservation dollars. And when it comes to EQIP, again, one of the largest and most commonly known programs, we know that only 23% of spending between 2017 and 2020 went to what USDA calls our climate smart activities, or practices that help lower emissions. So that's things like cover crops. Most of EQIP dollars went to practices that are really large structural practices, like fences or roofs or building aquaculture ponds, things that if you're a farmer or rancher, you're going to get money for wherever you can, but ultimately aren't reducing emissions or don't have the same, the highest public benefit. So most money in EQIP and the conservation programs right now are flowing to other practices that don't impact the climate, you'll also see that at least 5% of EQIP dollars went to practices that increase emissions. So this is funding for things like open pit animal waste storage lagoons, things that are only frustrating partly because we have other means of dealing with things like animal waste and doing so in a way that can lower emissions rather than these open pit slurries. So while all of this, all these things are important for farmers, fences, roofs, all that is important, they don't help farmers cut emissions, and they don't have the same large public benefit that climate smart agriculture can. There are other programs like the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP. So while EQIP is kind of a working lands program that pays you to adopt practices that help lower your emissions, there are other programs like CRP that helps take land and put it into temporary retirement programs or help set it aside for farmers. These contracts are typically 5 to 10 years. But what we found is that after 5 or 10 years, these CRP lands, they get plowed up or they get put back into production. So if there's any soil carbon that is built up, that ends up being released back up into the atmosphere. The Conservation Reserve Program made some headlines last year with the war in Ukraine because there were a lot of calls to enroll or to take CRP lands out of production or out of their contracts and put them back into production. And, that's bad for the climate because if there's soil carbon that we do end up storing, that land will get put back into production. So how can we shift CRP or the Conservation Reserve Program to focus on more long-term contracts and on more marginal land that can better store carbon? I'll mention a bill that Senators Booker and Grassley just introduced last week to address this very issue as well. So, Farm Bill priorities. First, we should protect SNAP. It's critical that funding for feeding hungry people is protected. If Congress is looking to find waste in the Farm Bill, they can find it in some of the subsidy programs, but it's certainly not in SNAP, where we're just trying to feed hungry people. So first priority should be protecting SNAP and making sure that hungry people are fed and we can help lift folks out of poverty. Second is protect the climate smart funding in the IRA. It's critical that agriculture begin to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, or they will soon be the leading source of US emissions. And this money should also not be sacrificed for other programs, whether it's subsidy programs or moving into SNAP. We can protect SNAP without stealing from these conservation programs. Third, we should be doing all that we can to shift conservation spending to practices that reduce emissions. So there are bills like Senator Booker's and Lee's EQIP Improvement Act that can ensure EQIP spending is spent on more climate smart agriculture, and we lower some of the structural practice payments. And that's a great example. I can, happy to answer questions on this bill, but this is a great example of a bill where it's not necessarily a climate bill, the EQIP Improvement Act. It's something that could be added to the Farm Bill because all it does is just increase the cost share for practices that have the most public benefits. So for a Republican, a conservative like Senator Mike Lee of Utah, he's into it because we're spending public dollars smarter. It's kind of a spend smarter, fiscal conservative type of bill. And for Senator Booker, he supports this bill because we're spending things on that improve environmental outcomes the most. So it kind of gets at that, how the Farm Bill can really cross these ideological lines. And then there are a number of other adjustments that we can make, whether it's within EQIP or within programs like CRP to help it become a carbon sink and ensure that more land is storing carbon. And last thing, if you're looking for kind of an immediate impact for yourself to lower your own carbon footprint, I put a link in here to EWG's Meat Eater's Guide to Climate Change. If you want to lower your emissions, the analogy that I use is beef is like one of those early 2000s Hummers in terms of how much pollutants it puts out there. It's just so far beyond what everything else is putting out there. An SUV would be like your pork, your EV or your hybrid car is like a plant-based food product, and walking or biking or public transportation, those are your peas and lentils and quinoa. So if you're looking to lower your emissions, it's most helpful to, I think, what you eat rather than where you source your meat from or where you source your food from. So
How about chicken? What kind of car is that?
chicken would be my,
Or fish?
yeah, chicken is probably like my 2008 Mazda. So it's somewhere in between.
Okay.
I think fish is probably more like your Honda Civic.
And Judy Burlfine's asking, cheese?
Cheese. Cheese is probably like your Grand Cherokee or your Jeep Compass.
This is great. I'm very excited about these new, what do they call it? Fermented meats, where they take the stem cells and culture them. So it's actually meat, but they don't kill animals to get it, except for the first one, the Adam, the Eve of animals. Anyway, thanks very much for laying all that out in a clear way and with good visuals. So we've got a couple of questions here. We always are running low on time, but let's see. Scott Lewis from Florida is asking any sense of how the debt discussions are looking at the Farm Bill funding?
That's a great question. There's going to be calls to, again, kind of claw back some of this money within the debt limit spending, right? And attack and steal some of this conservation dollars or some of the Inflation Reduction Act dollars. So you'll hear a lot of calls from environmental groups asking for a clean debt limit bill or, protect the environment and debt limit. You'll also hear a lot of talk about permitting reform that's continues to raise its head. But a lot of these programs, the CBO just did this. This is super wonky, so I apologize. But the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, just came out with their updated outlays or projected spending over the next 5 years. And that kind of sets what, a Farm Bill baseline might look like. So luckily they've, increased the projected outlays, the baseline for a lot of these conservation programs. So it's good news. And, folks are fighting to make sure that the debt limit doesn't impact these environmental programs.
How much goes to SNAP? That was huge.
Mhm.
And that's probably what they want to cut.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it was something with SNAP. It was like a 10 or 12% increase. And because SNAP is so big that it ends up being a big dollar amount. I'll also say, this summer is really critical in Farm Bill spending and Farm Bill negotiations. The Farm Bill the Farm Bill deadline is September 30th. That's when a lot of these programs that are authorized in the last Farm Bill expire. That's the end of the fiscal year. But the Farm Bill hasn't passed on time since, I think, 2008. The last Farm Bill passed in December of that same year of 2018. The 2013 Farm Bill passed in the spring of 2014. So almost 6 months later. So, right now is really the time where Congress is writing the bill. They're working on it. They're negotiating it and really trying to make sure that particularly on the Senate, that we have a strong progressive farm bill that includes climate change and helps farmers reduce emissions. And then the House bill gets that message across as well.
Okay. Is it Cherine Kravitz? I'm mispronouncing that. What's the percent? I think you answered this. What's the percentage of corporate farms that are receiving the subsidies? It was like 5 and 10%. Something like that. Is there a support for the small farmer or farmers that diversify their raising of livestock and raising crops?
No, that's a great question. Yeah, like I said, only about 7% of subsidies go to farmers who grow fruits and vegetables or specialty crops. And that's where most small farmers, that's what they grow, is they primarily grow specialty crops. So most of this funding goes to what we call fairway farmers or city slickers. So EWG puts out a lot of pieces using our subsidy database where, we highlight, I'll find a link to that.
Okay.
We
And-
highlight that folks who live in the biggest cities, the cities with the 50 cities with the densest population or the biggest population, the subsidies that they receive. So it's, tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah. It's a big bill. All
Mhm.
right. Do these collaborative wealthy, do the collaborative wealthy farms pay taxes or just collect funds?
That's a great question. I'm sure they pay taxes on some of this. Do they pay taxes on everything? Unclear.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
here's-
Well, we want to get on, move on to our action. So we've got all the links for you in the chat. But if you don't have that or can't reach that, it's environmentalworkinggroup.org. They will lay it all out for you. So thank you so much, Geoff, for coming and clarifying this for us so that we can be more effective in our action this month. And we send our blessings that you continue this sacred work. And the Environmental Working Group, we are so proud of them and all the work that they've done. You said they were established in the 90s, right? And so they've been hard at work for 30 years. So-
Right. Well, I appreciate all of you. The best thing that you can do to help make a difference in the Farm Bill is call your members of Congress, send notes, use this action alerts right now as kind of the first step, right? Don't make it be the only step, but just the first step in your advocacy and really help direct them to make climate a priority in the Farm Bill.
And Mirala says, thank you, Geoff. We've been researching this for months and your presentation was the clearest so far. And that's why I invited you, because I heard you speak at Interfaith Power and Light webinar, and it was very clear. Or no, I heard you typing. Scott was speaking, but it
Scott?
was very clear, good visuals.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And then I filled in last week at Interfaith Power and Light's lobby day here in DC.
Great.
I put my email in the chat as well. Do feel
Yeah.
free to email me if you have any
Terrific. If
questions.
you have further questions. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm happy to be a resource for you all. I look forward to it.
Fred's written a long thing, but I gotta move on, but thank you, Fred. We'll look at that in a minute. All right, thank you all. Thank you, Geoff, for a great presentation. So now I want to turn to another Encinitias resident, our steering committee member, Judy Burlfine, and she is going to get us going on our action for tonight. So take it away, Judy.
Okay, thank you. And Ed, are you there? And can you put up the 2 important slides? So we're going to all take action. We're going to submit a comment on our senator's website, or if you'd prefer to make a phone call, you can do that. And we're going to contact them about everything that we just heard about. So it's easy. While I'm speaking, you can do this, pull up your senator's website, put in their last name. Like for me, it would be feinstein.senate.gov or padilla.senate.gov, wherever you live. And once you have that taken care of, I'll put that in the chat in case you're trying to figure it out. And then we'll go to the next slide and I will tell you what we're going to say. I don't know if you can see that. Oh, yeah. So our key message is exactly in line with what we just heard, but we're going to make the Jewish connection that we're celebrating the Jewish agricultural holiday of Shavuot. And we are reminded when we celebrate this agricultural holiday that we are dependent on the land and healthy soil for our survival. It's kind of amazing that that's not something people are making connections to. And so when you bring up the website and you go to look for wherever it says contact, and you'll have to fill in your name and all of that. But this is the main message we want to convey, and you can write it as exactly as I have it written here, and I'll copy this into the chat, or you can jazz it up and add a little something personal. We want to make sure that climate is a priority in the 2023 Farm Bill. And Geoff talked a lot about this funding from the IRA for the conservation programs to boost the current Farm Bill so we can fully fund EKIP and the other conservation related programs. So that's, he said 19.5 billion. So I have written here 20 billion. So this is the message. Go ahead and do it right now. And once you've done one of your senators, let us know in the chat that you've written to them. And then if there's still time, write to the other one. And as soon as the call is over, don't get up from your chair, write to your representative also. And if anyone has questions.
And we'll return after we've allowed a bit of time, let's say 10 or 12 minutes for this. We'll return just for a little bit of a closing. So we'll gather back.
Yeah, and if you don't type quickly, you can go into the chat and copy what I put in there and just copy it right into your message to your senator. But remember, it's always best when you make it a little bit personal. So feel free to mix it up. Thank you, Geoff. Yes. Go, Geoff.
Yes, I'd like Senator Cardin's office, please.
Okay, Devorah, we can hear you, so you might want to mute yourself. Okay, thank you, Ed, for going back and forth so people can keep track. And I'll put this in the chat again. Oh, and Geoff is saying if they ask when you submit your email, if you want a response, check the yes button. I'm sure that makes them more accountable. So tell them yes. Hey, thank you, Susan Diamond. Sent an email to your senators the other day. Should you send another one?
Yeah.
I guess if you just sent it recently on this very topic, maybe not. But if you sent it on a different topic, definitely go ahead and write on the Farm Bill.
As a former congressional staffer, what they do is they collect at the end of the day or at the end of the week, they do what's called a tally. So they mark down how many messages and on what subjects they've gotten into the office.
So are you saying it's okay to do it more than once from the same
Yep.
person?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, he definitely trumps whatever I said. So yep, go ahead and send another message. Phyllis, thank you. And Bobby, thank you for contacting Senator Rubio. It's super helpful to hear from former staffers because it gives us an idea of what works and what doesn't. Mirala, thank you for contacting Van Hollen. Shireen, we'll be hoping that you'll write to them later tonight or tomorrow if you have to leave now. So we now have 27 people on the call, and I'm hoping we'll have 27 or maybe 3 times that many contacts. Thank you, Moshe and Bob. But we're senators and House members. We just started with, there was a question of, do we just contact senators? I did that to make it easy, so you could contact them right now on this call. But I also have written up here, contact your representative as soon as the call is over, or if you finished your 2 senators, go ahead and contact your representative. Thank you, George. Yep, yes, Moshe, contact Anna Eshu also. Thank you, Louise. Okay, I think a lot of people were at 6 o'clock and people are starting to have to leave. So Deborah, maybe you want to come back and close things out. And if you haven't finished sending your email, please finish as soon as you can. Thank you. Deborah, do we have you? There you are. Okay, Deborah, you're up. Oh, maybe you muted us.
Sorry. No, I'm here.
Okay,
I'm just
people are
slow.
starting to have to leave, and it is.
Yes. Yeah, so I wanted to thank everybody for coming tonight, and thank you for working on your action. And if you haven't finished, keep it up. And I just wanted to say that tonight is the 41st day of counting of the Omer, which is definitely a farming kind of ritual that we are doing, counting the days with using a sheet, a leaf, I don't know what to call it, a sheath of barley between Passover and Shavuot, between liberation and revelation. So tonight we count 41 days. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. Blessings to the source of the universe to command us to count this day and make this time count. It's 6 weeks and 6 days. And Rebecca talked about the will to, and the faith, the hope to keep going when the going gets tough. And right now, Kabbalistically, we are in the triangle of counting the Omer of Netzach and Hod. And Hod is like a sprint, and Netzach is like a marathon. And so sometimes we have to do the sprints like what we're doing tonight, and writing about the farm bill, writing to our senators about the farm bill. But a lot of times we have to do the Netzach. We have to keep going. It's an eternity. That's what Netzach means, eternity. And sometimes it feels like an eternity for these things to get going. So, and then they come together as Yesod, which is the foundation of our earth. So, of the earth. So I want to bless you all. Tzedek tirdof, justice shall you all pursue. And may you continue in blessing with this sacred work. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Geoff, for being here with us. And we thank Rebecca as well. I'm sorry she had to leave, but for giving us that inspiration on faith and hope. And don't forget, tell your friends about Ed Begley coming next month. And Geoff, you're invited to come back too, if you want to hear him speak, of course, and bring all your friends, all your colleagues. That should be a really exciting time, and getting geared up and ready for our lobby day in July. So good night, everybody. Have a pleasant evening and a good night's sleep. And we'll see you next week, next month. I'll see you next month.